Excuse me, Your Worship, we're now live.
Good, thank you, Chris. All right, Council, it's 2 o'clock and I will call the Strategic Initiatives Standing Committee meeting to order. Today, we acknowledge that Collingwood is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe and Ottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda. And the motion reads that the content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for March 1, 2021 be adopted as presented with a couple of amendments. Number 1, report added 4.1 service delivery review, Deloitte. Item added 7.1 Collingwood Judicial Inquiry Report Next Steps Update, CAO Skinner. Under other business, we will have a discussion on the provincial lockdown. And there's an item being deleted, 4.3 deputation by Tim Fryer. He has withdrawn that request. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Jeffrey, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Are there any declarations today, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that situation as we move through the agenda, please let us know. That brings us to item 4, deputations. And item 4.1 is the service delivery review. And we have today Matt Colley, a partner, and Shelley Spence and Sara Banh from Deloitte. And I will pass it over to CAO Skinner to introduce.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I'm really very pleased to introduce Shelley Spence in particular, who's done a lot of work on this project with her team, and Matt and Sara as well. But before they speak, and I hope you'll enjoy some of the things that they'll talk about, bringing their broad understanding of many municipalities in Ontario and beyond to an evaluation of ours. I wanted to talk very briefly about why I thought this assignment actually is very important. So we applied under the Modernization Funding just over a year ago for the money to do this, and the province did provide all of the funding, about $180,000 overall. And what council had been asking of staff was that we do a deep dive. And I know that when you started and we're doing potentially your first or second budget, you talked about, well, you know, what's really going on in each of these departments. And one of the first deep dives that was delivered, and we delivered it in-house, was the Parks, Recreation and Culture Review. And they started to look at what are the programs that they deliver, and they ended up suggesting that they delivered 2. And programs really address the needs of an entire group. So things like the percent of active, adults in our community would be a program would be out there trying to encourage people to be active. And within that program, all the services that we're delivering, and those usually are services to individuals, things like sailing lessons and walking groups and all of building permits and all of the many things that we deliver. And I always think of this in a structured framework. And I think that this structured framework is important because it's one of the ways that we can accept and act on the instructions of council in a reasonable way that everyone understands. So if we look at the top, we have our vision, and quite recently you refreshed the vision in our community-based strategic plan. And that's really where we all want to end up. It describes the Collingwood. That's our vision. And then there's a number of strategies, and those talk about the things that we most want to transform to drive us toward the vision. So we have 5 goals in our strategic plan that are really those strategies that the things that we're going to transform and concentrate on transforming. And then below that are all the programs and services that you as council are governing and providing to the people who live and visit here. And it's those that we want to do well. We want to do great customer service on all of them. And on all of them, we're continuously improving them to be in line with our master plans. And without further ado, much beyond that, Shelley and Matt and their team have dived into what we do in Collingwood and provided us largely at the operational level, but to some extent also at the strategic level, with a number of suggestions that I hope you will find interesting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. We'll pass the floor over to Matthew and Shelley.
Thank you very much. First off, I guess, from our perspective, we'd like to start by thanking management of the town in terms of their participation in our engagement and in our work. I would say I'd be remiss to say that that an engagement like this does not go well without active participation and engagement from the people in management. And so Sonia and team have done a great job of engaging and paying attention to this engagement. And as was alluded to, this was an engagement that was funded through a program of the Government of Ontario. And that engagement spoke to the seriousness of the town's engagement spoke to the seriousness of the opportunity that the town sees in terms of improving its services moving forward. So it was great to see that, and so we'd like to thank management for their support in helping us through this engagement and making sure that we had the information and data that we needed to complete our work. So I do believe that there is a presentation. Yeah, oh, perfect. And so we'll start to go through that. So in terms of our engagement and our activities, if we just move to the next slide, what we want to cover off for you today, first off is, what is a service delivery review? We'll talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to talk specifically about how we approach this for the town of Collingwood. And then we'll get into, what were the outcomes? What were the results of our review? And then we'll open up the floor for questions, so Shelley, as was mentioned, I'm the engagement partner, and I was involved in the engagement, but Shelley Spence, a director who works with me, was fairly hands-on during the engagement. And so, she's with me here today to talk to some of the details about our work. So if you want to move on to the next slide. So in terms of a service delivery review, as we mentioned, this was a program that was made available to municipalities across Ontario, and it was really, brought through the Ford government. It actually started last year, and we worked with a number of municipalities last year, and through a couple of municipalities through the summer and fall. In terms of meeting the objectives of the provincial government in terms of working with municipalities in Ontario to look at their operations and see how services could be improved to residents. The general objectives of a service delivery review is to really get an understanding of what the services are that are being performed by the municipality, why they're being performed, and get a general idea as to what are the outcomes that are really being driven for. And then looking at those services and why they're being performed, start to look at opportunities in terms of how can you either increase the benefits or outcomes or reduce the cost of service. So is there anything that you're doing that you could maybe change the way in terms of how you're doing it? Are there efficiencies that could be capitalized, technology to be implemented, things like that to essentially lead to a better outcome, a better service, and delivered in a more cost-effective way. Another aspect is also how do you measure your current performance, and how do you establish expectations for performance? And so these reviews, if done appropriately and with appropriate thought, can certainly really be informative for council in terms of making informed, sustainable and strategic choices in terms of the service levels for the town moving forward. And so it's an engagement that is foundational in terms of just getting an understanding and an articulation of, what does the town really want to do from a service perspective. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shelley, and Shelley will cover the next slides.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. So the objectives specific to this one for Collingwood were we're taking a look at long-term financial stability, maximizing public value, driving service level improvements that meet current and long-term needs of residents. This is, a point in time, and service delivery reviews do occur once in a while, but it's important to have that sustainable long-term frame of mind in place. And also, recommend improvements to processes that are going to drive efficiencies and cost effectiveness, and making better use of integration of existing and new tools and technologies. So these were the objectives, and what we produced, which you have received, is a very lengthy report. And within that report, we have certain aspects that we covered specifically for Collingwood. One of which was to rationalize the services. We had a service inventory that was done quite a while ago. And we took that listing and we rationalized it into 73 services and their associated costs. So that was quite an exercise to work with each of the departments and groups to understand exactly, again, back to that first objective, what services are we actually doing here? Then we defined 8 programs and program outcomes. Those programs are the why are we producing these services, why are we doing these services, and what outcomes do we want to see from those? So we took those services and we mapped them to the profiles. However, you will see that you could, sometimes services touch different programs and sometimes programs touch quite a few services. So it's not a direct one-for-one. We then also through interviews and through our knowledge from other jurisdictions, we identified 91 service opportunities for the town to consider. And we developed the main themes around these opportunities that we are seeing to help the town understand what service changes could occur. We also took a look at the performance measurement side of a service delivery and said, okay, well, the town has developed some great customer service key performance indicators. How can we improve on that and compare that to some other jurisdictions and some of the leading practices that we see around key performance indicator reporting? And then lastly, it was known that the town was looking at a customer service management information system to automate the manual process of dealing with customer service requests across the town. So we put together some of the business requirements that would be necessary for looking at one of those systems. Next slide, please. So the first part about the program and program outcomes, the 8 that we came up with, we did this through a workshop collaboratively with the leaders of the town and management. And we developed these 9 programs and program names, and then the outcomes that are a result. And you can read, and you've probably read these in the report, but community development, environmental management, community safety, community health and well-being, arts, culture, heritage, community access and mobility, corporate service, support services, and municipal governance, leadership and finance. And why did we do this? What is the benefit? When you actually look at programs and program outcomes, you can then understand what your day-to-day job is and how it's contributing to the greater good of these programs and outcomes. And the programs span time. They may change over time, but these are long-term looks at things. These aren't sort of short-term or mid-term strategic goals and things that we're doing. This is why we're here. This is why we get out of bed and go to work every day and do the services that we do for the town. And these are the outcomes that we're all working towards when we do our jobs and provide those services. Next slide, please. So with the service inventory listing, this is just an excerpt from the appendix that you see in the report. We took the 73 services and we assigned them to the programs and outcomes that they best fit. And as I mentioned, they can fit many, but we aligned them to the programs and outcomes that they seem to fall into best. And one of the things that you can see just even visually here is that there are a lot of services that go towards a program and a program outcome. And they also come from many different parts of the town. So there's many different departments, library, heritage, culture, that are all working towards arts, culture, and heritage, and the outcome of recognizing and preserving the strength and diversity of arts, culture, and build heritage within the community. So this exercise has the benefit, again, of aligning and understanding how all the services that the town is doing on a day-to-day basis, and there's many, as I said, there's 73, so it's a lot of services that you guys are doing. We now have a viewpoint of what those are, what programs and outcomes they're working towards, and we did a high-level costing of the services as well. Next slide, please. And the last part of the report that I wanted to mention today is the themes around the opportunities. So there's 91 opportunities that have been gathered from interviews and from other jurisdictions. Some of the things that we've seen in other towns that also seem to be a good opportunity for Collingwood. We group them into themes of continuing the journey of digitization. Sorry, it's a hard word to get off the tongue. But really the town does have some good technology and has done some great strides in that regard and can continue to do so. The second theme is for those technologies that you have already have or are looking at, you need to align your processes to make sure you're getting the best out of those technologies. So it's not that you try and computerize what you're already doing. You need to change what you're doing to work with the computerization so that you get the best benefit out of it. The next theme was understanding and documenting the level of service being provided by the town today and the future. There's a lot of opportunities around looking at service levels and saying, okay, where do we want to be the best at something? Where do we want to, what business do we want to be in? What level of service do we require? And the usual example is, how quickly do we need to get the snow off the roads? Something like that. Some towns, it has to be within a few hours. Some towns, a side street can wait a day or two. So that's really a decision and a level of service that needs to be examined, as well as the cost of doing that. Because obviously you can be the best in class at everything, but there's limited resources to do that. And lastly, encouraging department collaboration. And I believe that these program outcomes and programs will start doing that and start helping with investments towards cross collaboration towards those program outcomes. The next step for the town really is to take away those opportunities and mull them and decide what's next and what would be a short-term quick win, what do they want to implement now, and what needs to sit back for a while as a longer-term goal. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back to you, Matt.
Okay, thanks. So in conclusion, in terms of the work that we performed, there's a couple of important points that we want to drive home. So first off is, there is significant growth that is happening in the population, and that's going to drive services and costs. And it's the demographic of that change that I think is a particular challenge for a town like the town of Collingwood, where it may be a younger generation and an older generation that is coming to the town, and the way that they use the town services are different, and their demand of and expectation of services is going to be different as well. And so one point that we really think in terms of dealing with this type of growth is really to focus in on digital infrastructure, because that actually helps, in the longer term, helps drive the costs in a more manageable way. If you can think digital first in terms of how you provide your services, then the need in terms of keeping up with this demand moving forward will be much more manageable, because you'll have some automation aspects included in how you deliver those services. The second point is really the importance of having a definition and framework. So, what we've gone through, with the town through this review, was really thinking about these programs and what are the outcomes, and making sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of understanding those outcomes and why they're doing it. It gives them a sense of purpose, but it helps significantly in terms of collaboration, which ties to the third point around breaking down the silos, which is something that a lot of organizations struggle with. But from when you take a citizen's point of view first, in terms of how the services are being delivered, and you can take it from their perspective, I think that looking at outcomes helps achieve that, and that will help the town's departments be more connected and provide that citizen point of view as they deliver services. And then service changes being the last point. So, there is going to be, we've identified service improvement opportunities for the town to think about and think as to how it can implement these suggested changes. They're recommendations at this point, and the way that they get implemented, I think is up to the town in terms of the resources that the town has. There is a limitation on resources in terms of time, people, and money that's available for some of these opportunities. And so prioritizing these opportunities and figuring out which one should be first on the list is an important first step. And with that comes with KPIs, in terms of looking at these services and the KPIs. So making sure you have an understanding of how you want to measure these services moving forward, and what changes that we've identified would help drive improvement in the KPIs that you choose to measure the services on. So with that, that's at a high level in terms of our engagement, a summary of what we've accomplished. And at this point, we'd be open to questions from the committee.
Thank you, Matthew and Shelley, for the presentation. And I will look to Clerk Almus to see if there is anyone in our gallery who would like to comment on the presentation we just received. Sara?
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. If there is anybody wishing to speak, please press the raise your hand feature. If you're on a telephone, please press *9. Your Worship, it doesn't look like there's anyone wishing to speak to this matter at this time.
Okay, thank you, Sara. So I'll open the floor to Council then. Council, any questions or comments of our presenters today? Councillor Jeffrey, and then Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. So this was an in-depth report, and I'm going to be honest, I read the presentation first and I thought, well, this really seems like a lot of common sense. And then I read the first 28 or 30 pages of the report, and I guess I still want to know what those 91 recommendations were. So then I went through and I read them, and so I can really appreciate the importance of what we're doing through this. But I just wondered if we missed the mark on a few things. And one of my big bugaboos is, and I was happy to hear you, a citizen-focused delivery of services, was the number of people who just can't get a human voice. We seem to triage behind voicemail and email, and we avoid wherever possible referring people to telephone lines. And the one example I have is an 81-year-old woman who had a very sick raccoon on her front lawn and didn't know, and a man told her to get back in her house, and she was flustered, and she called and she got voicemail at our front counter, and didn't know what to do next, went online and said she'd get a response in 3 business days. So then I get the call. So then I get a hold of staff, and then they solve it. So I think we have a glitch in how we triage, as much as I think I read in your report where, some of the things we're measuring, how well or how many people we respond to under 3 days may not reflect what we need to do better within that. So I made a lot of notes. So I didn't actually see anything referring to human contact until we got into, I think, the clerk's department with commissions of oath, and the fire department in terms of their education, which is very important to get the right messages to people. But I think it should be a broader corporate mission to be able to triage better. And I did see the 311 So my question is a 311 service a human voice service, or is it another level of email and triaging a different way?
So thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I could answer that. The work we did around the customer management information system some people call it CRM, so customer relationship management. It's something that a lot of municipalities are exploring or implementing right now for that exact reason that you just mentioned, where a citizen has an issue, they call the counselor then has to find the right staff member, the staff member then may or may not be available to do it, and then you've got to loop back to that person because they called you. And that is a lot of people's time that's being spent on that issue. So a CMIS, the intake should be, however, is most comfortable for the citizen. And it may be that they call up, it may be that they fill out a web page, they may call a person and they type it in, but a ticket would get issued and sent to the right person and tracked through what we call workflow, so that that this went to Public Works, who, I don't know if it's Public Works, I guess it was animals that would have to pick up that raccoon. So it would go to the animal officer. The animal officer would say, oh, I have to go to that place right now, pick up the animal, and then they would close off the ticket. That would automatically come back and be emailed to the person, or if the person isn't comfortable with email, it could go back to your customer service group and have them call. So you would not be involved in that tracking.
Yeah.
And
not that I don't.
And these are expensive systems, and there's a lot, there's a lot of different goods and bads of them, but that was one of the bigger recommendations that came out of this. Matt?
Just to add on to that, though, in terms of like a 311 system, there are multiple, like Shelley's point is there are multiple ways in which, residents can contact, and it's not just about a digital solution, but it's how the people interact with the technology that is very, very important. And so for a situation like you mentioned there, where there's a live raccoon, that's something that can't wait. You can't wait for someone to pick up a voicemail, or wait until someone reads it online, right? Like, it has to be dealt with immediately, right? And so that type of understanding in terms of that expectation needs to be thought through in terms of and brought into how that CMIS system actually interacts and operates.
Thank you.
I saw Sonia Skinner. Did you have your hand up? Did you want to comment on this issue?
Oh, yes. And actually, I thought this was a very important question and brought up, thank you, through you to Councillor Jeffrey as well, because we do have our customer service desk working 8:30 to 4:30 every day. We always have at least 2 people there on the phones. So if someone's getting a voicemail, then there must be someone at the desk, one or multiple people at the desks. And last year we published some customer service standards so for anyone that comes in through the customer service desk, they would receive a call back. I'm just reading it right now. I think it's within 1 day. Yeah, within 24 hours. So one would hope that the woman with the raccoon could have received a call back that same day. And if she couldn't wait that long, if she called in an hour or 15 minutes, that we would have been able to respond to that call right away. Because we would like the public to know that we're here to talk with them if they need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey, any follow-up or other questions?
Yeah, thank you. So just some other questions, and maybe it's because I got kind of excited about some of the things, and maybe it's part of next steps, but I think for me as a policymaker, I was most interested in the cost effectiveness and how that gets quantified, because, another example, because I think it makes it easier, is we voted not to do the Elvis event anymore, because for me, it was a unanimous vote. For me, it was the 2,100 to 2,500 hours of staff time that weren't accounted for in our financial statements. But on the back end, it's never quantified as to how we used the plus 2,500 we freed up by not doing the event, and how that flows through. So for me, it's always important how we're saying it's cost effective, but I like to see the numbers to tell me how it's cost effective, that it's just not this elusive statement. And I think it's a great foundational document, and I look forward to seeing what staff can do in terms of really making it work for the people of Collingwood. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. This was an excellent, most enlightening document, far more than I actually anticipated. And I think I, as one member of council, do perceive that our staff are extremely busy and always something on their plates. And this document, this study, certainly for me, helped to elucidate the reasons why. The fact that we are still doing so much manual work, which was a complete surprise to me, and especially as an example in finance, as an example. The fact that we are working with multiple digital platforms across department that aren't talking to each other. The fact that some of our policies, and I'm referencing to HR, some of our policies have not been updated for many years. So this was one of the best documents that I've ever read. I kind of wish in a way that we were getting ready to go into 2022 budget, because it certainly would be fresh in our minds. But leading to that, the 91 recommendations were organized by department. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to resort those priorities by timeline, so short, medium, or long term, by cost, and by urgency or by priority. Is that a possibility, doing that in a digital way, so that as we approach the planning of our 2022 budget, that we can look at these from the perspective of what should we do first? Through you to either Ms. Spence or Mr. Colley.
Would like to take that question.
If it please the mayor, His Worship, I will. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. We did come up with I would think of it as a big list at this point. We tried to, or we did tie it back to service and department. So a little bit more detail there. And we did put some parameters around it, as you see, as you look at that spreadsheet towards the end, about, the kind of cost that it could be, that sort of thing. But I believe that, and I would like to turn this over to Sonia if I could, but I believe that that's the next step for staff, is to do that kind of prioritization, and to take a look at which ones they want to, which ones will stick, which ones are short term, which ones are longer term, which ones are big and expensive, which ones are not, something that you could do right away. So on that note, if you don't mind, Sonia, to discuss that a little bit further.
Okay, through your worship, to Councillor Doherty. Yes, I think that when I saw this list, it was long, and I didn't want anyone to get the expectation that they would all be done tomorrow, because I think there's some very thoughtful things in there that might take more than 1 year to accomplish. So we did have a couple of discussions at department heads about how to tackle the list. And I think what we'd like to do is to take the list away now that Deloitte has sorted it and compared us to other jurisdictions and made some of their recommendations, so that we can come back in context with things like the pending list from council with some recommended actions.
Great.
And I also want to be clear on the journey that we're on. I think that Councillor Jeffrey had also mentioned sort of wanting to know the larger scope of, you know, what we're spending our money and our efforts on. And I think that that's going to be a bit of a journey that I'm hoping that we're going to take a couple of really big steps toward that for our 2022 budget. We might not get all the way there in 2022. It might be 2023. But when I said at the beginning of this presentation about why I think this is very important for council in governing what we do, it is very important for you to understand the amount of the tax base and the staff base that's being spent on each of these services and what outcomes you're getting from the programs, because ultimately they're all pushing toward those same things. So in a nutshell, we would like to report back, Councillor Doherty, and we would like to sort of everyone to know that this will be a bit of a journey, but with this assignment and the provincial funding and the expertise from Deloitte, I think we moved, potentially pushed ourselves forward a year in this process, but not all the way to the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Anything to add, Councillor Doherty?
Yes, just one other quick question and a comment. I wanted to thank Councillor Jeffrey for her questions because they were terrific and they were also on my mind. And then finally, I see reference to a draft report sent to the ministry. So this report has already been sent to the ministry before we as a Collingwood Town Council had seen it.
Like
Through you to Mr. Colley or to Ms. Spence.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably turn it over to Sonia for that. We did not send the report to the ministry, but I think that's up to the town's administration to do that. So.
Thank you, through your worship. We didn't send it yet. The deadline is today. So pending your receipt of the report tonight, we'll send the draft, which was a requirement of the funding, that it be sent by today. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson.
Councillor Doherty. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. There were several items on the 93 item list that were confidential. And I'm curious to know, I'm thinking of items 15, 26, 43, 44, there were several others that are confidential, which what is one to make of that?
I'm quite happy to take that if you don't mind, Mayor and Councillor McLeod. The report will be publicly posted because it is through the provincial funding. And there were certain issues on the report that we didn't feel was something that we would want to be on a public report. And this is not an example of this exact report, but I can give an example of cybersecurity as a really good example of when we have not put an opportunity out there in a public report. Because if we say we have an issue with cybersecurity, guess what? So some of the opportunities that we had were more around, they're not anything that we're trying to keep from council or anything like that. It's just more that it isn't for public consumption, but it's for something to be considered by management to help them move forward.
And so thank you. And as a follow-up, so does council need to know about these things, or is this, you say management, but is that something we ought to be apprised of in some sort of thing? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McLeod. We can take another look at those and determine if it's just something that we could email out to council, or if they would need to be dealt with in a closed session. But the intention was just like the cybersecurity example, not to put things out into the public realm that would be inappropriate for that. So if you let me take that one away, I'll look into it.
Thank you. Another question that I had was concerning a couple of recommendations within the 93 about hiring. At least one recommendation for an additional person is included. Could one of the authors of the report tell us through you, Mr. Mayor, just exactly how many it is? I want to be sure that my math is right.
Thank
Shelley?
you. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I would have to, one of the things about improving services is you usually have to invest in technology, people, or changing processes. So there were a few instances throughout there that it really did look like it required an extra person. Now it's not, you know, it has to be budgeted, it has to be worked out as to exactly what that FTE would look like. And as you know, a hiring of an FTE is a continuing operating cost going forward. So again, that would be prioritized with all of the other 91 opportunities within that. So it would have been a case where we saw that there was really a need for more FTE room in that area. I don't have it off the top of my head how many of those we recommended, but we do try and look at people, technology, and process to make improvements. People tend to get added when there is a need in a growth area in most municipalities.
Follow-up, Councillor McCauley?
Not on that thread, but on another one. When it comes to, we have 93 opportunities. Is that relatively normal for an organization this size with a report this size? I just want to know if we're, you know, within acceptable parameters. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
And through the mayor, you know, with respect to that question, they do vary in terms of the number of opportunities. You know, what I will say is that there, to Sonia's point that was made earlier, to management's point, you know, it's unlikely that you would implement all 93 opportunities, right? There has to be a prioritization exercise. But we've had examples of clients where we've had 50 to 60 opportunities, hundreds of opportunities. So it does vary, but I would say that the most important thing is the prioritization in terms of, you know, here is the lay of the land in terms of the improvement opportunities and what makes sense going forward and what's actually achievable, and that is an important next step. So.
Thank you. My concern there is an optics one, and the reason that I ask that is, you know, are we doing? Is this a B plus? Is this, and you know, or is this a not complete? Is sort of what I'm asking.
Yeah, and through the chair, you know, what I would state, like, I mean, we won't evaluate, like we won't assign grades. We get that question a lot because people want to know. You have to recognize that. You know, a lot of the municipalities, while they could be similar, they're actually, you know, very different, right? In terms of, like, Collingwood is, you know, it's got unique growth challenges that you wouldn't see in other municipalities in Ontario. There's a tourism aspect to it that other municipalities may not, right? So, you know, we can't comment on like a grade is, you know, what I would say. I would say though, like, you know, when I started this engagement, if you told me we had 93 opportunities, I would not be surprised by that at all. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Council, any other questions, comments? Councillor Colley?
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our presenters and my colleagues, I agree. I think this report is outstanding and it's really exciting, and it's actually great to have a blueprint and a way to move forward. And similar to my colleagues, I was really taken with a lot of the recommendations, but just as an opportunity to recognize our staff work, it really jumped out at me that we have here that our customer service division handled between 12 and 13,000 inquiries last year. And of course, as counselors, we're always going to hear about, you know, the kind of drunken raccoon that's hanging around, or, you know, the one thing that gets missed. So I think it's nice to highlight the idea that clearly 12 to 13,000 other residents had their question answered. And this in particular, I really liked the suggestion. It sounded very practical and reasonable to consider our frequently asked questions section of our award-winning website. You know, that probably makes sense for all new residents. So I just wanted to share the sentiment. I think it's very exciting, and I think it was filled with a number of highlights to all the hard work our staff really is doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Comey. Any other questions or comments, Council? Councillor Hamlin?
Mr. Mayor, through you to one of our presenters. One of the things that's on my mind, you know, I guess less during COVID, but is that we have our staff distributed between at least 5 different buildings in town. And, you know, not unlike, I'm sure, a lot of towns, as growth has occurred, you know, town hall can only fit so many. So as a council, we haven't, at least this term, had to struggle with that question. And COVID has taken a lot of staff into their own personal space for working. So it's not pressing right now. But I noticed through your report, you did, you know, emphasize the need to, you know, discuss common goals, further cross-departmental collaboration, organization-wide information sharing, you know, all good things. So my question is this: in your experience, does it make any difference if staff are in the same building or on the same floor, or does that tend to, you know, assist? Or maybe are we in the era it doesn't matter? I know from my own working years, similar departments shared floors, and, you know, we did, anyway, you understand my question. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I'll start, and maybe Shelley, you can jump in, you know, to the extent that my answer is incomplete from your perspective. But you know, what I would say, you're right in terms of a COVID era. It's kind of flipped upside down how some of the administration, you know, works, right, and how they do work. You know, from my experience in terms of what I've seen, I think there is an efficiency in terms of having people together and being able to communicate when health guidelines permit, and you know, some organization to that. But in terms of how you organize them, I mean, you know, what I would say is that there is some benefit to actually mixing up your staff too, to have them, you know, not only just always sitting within their department, but also, you know, sitting within other people that are providing similar services to citizens, because that's where you get some innovations, some ideas coming together in terms of how to better service the citizen, right? So I think there's a number of ways in which you could organize, you know, staff, assuming health guidelines permit, in terms of, you know, maybe there's a citizen-focused view to how you organize your staff moving forward, right? As an example. The traditional approach obviously being by department, by service line, and getting people who provide the similar service to work together as well. So there are options there. I do find you will have to, you know, the decision that you make in a couple of years from now on an issue like that will work for that period of time, and there'll be great benefits. But then eventually there's going to have to be an adjustment to that as well. Like it's never always going to be the perfect answer for years and years and years to come. And so I think you have to be agile in your thinking that way. And Shelley, I don't know if you have more to add.
No, that was great. And one of the things I really like about the municipal space is that there are a lot of people out there doing their jobs. So physically there's public works and there's bylaw officers, etc. And getting them to sort of have a communication with each other is helpful as well. So, you know, the blinders aren't on when you're on the street looking at something, when you see an issue, that you can communicate that through to the other department to deal with it. And that doesn't take a physical space, but what it does is it takes that mindset of working towards those programs and program outcomes to say, oh, one of our programs is mobility and there's something blocking the road, or one of our programs is art and culture, and there's this really great, you know, thing that I've heard of from somewhere else, and just contributing from less of a physical, but more of a breaking down that silos kind of mentality towards those outcomes.
Thank you very much. That's my only question.
Council, any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would be remiss not to recognize Ingrid Masiak for her management with Deloitte of the work. There was quite a bit of engagement across multiple departments, so she did a fantastic job pulling this together. And the steering committee that included Clerk Almus and Director Slama, as well as Executive Director Culver. And I don't think I've left anyone out, no. So thank you to them from me.
You and if there's no other comments, I'll make mine. It certainly is a very interesting report. It's an interesting way to view our operations at Town Hall, to see ways that we can find efficiencies and increase our effectiveness in our services. And having the number of opportunities we do, I think is a good sign for growth for our community. But I did have a question, and that is, this was done with the first funding wave, and I'm wondering if there's anything in this list with the, because I understand there's a second wave being rolled out. Is there any opportunity to utilize any of these opportunities for getting funding in the upcoming second round of provincial funding? I don't know if that maybe goes to either of you or to CEO Skinner. Who would like to take that question?
Yeah, go ahead, Sonia, if you want. Yeah.
I was just going to say that we had a number of conversations at the department heads with Treasurer Quinlan and the other department heads around what might fit with the province's second call for modernization funding. They had 2 or 3 things that they were emphasizing in that call: IT changes, modernization to processes, etc. So I don't think the deadline has yet passed for that one, but we hadn't found quite the perfect application yet, but had it at front of mind.
Okay, thanks, Sonia. So we do need a motion to receive. So the motion is that council receive the service delivery review from Deloitte and refer the report to staff for a report on next steps and implementation. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Mover Councillor Doherty and Councillor Berman. We've had good discussion, so I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you to Shelley and Matthew for the report. It's given us lots of food for thought and some good opportunities to increase our operations and the efficiencies here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our second deputation is from our Lobbyist Registrar, Jocelyn McCauley, and it's the 2020 annual report of the Lobbyist Registrar. And Sara, if you can bring Jocelyn on board.
Certainly, Your Worship. And while she's joining us, I would like to thank Jocelyn for staying on as she has changed her career path, but we were fortunate to keep her for our Lobbyist Registrar services, which has been excellent. So she's put together this great presentation, and we look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Sara, and welcome, Jocelyn, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, council members. So I'm here today to present my annual report as Lobbyist Registrar to the town of Collingwood. Thank you. You can go to the next slide. So as you are aware, on January 20th, 2020, the Collingwood Town Council voted to establish a lobbyist registry pursuant to section 223.9 of the Municipal Act. With the enactment and passage of the lobbyist registry bylaw and corresponding code of conduct, the town of Collingwood became the 7th municipality in Ontario and the first of its size to implement a municipal lobbyist registry system. 1 year later, the lobbyist registry forms an integral part of the town's accountability and transparency framework by promoting and enhancing the integrity of municipal decision-making through the public disclosure and regulation of lobbying activities. So in this past year, we also saw the release of the report of the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, 36 of the 306 recommendations made by Associate Chief Justice Frank Morocco were directed at lobbying. A number of these recommendations were implemented prior to the release of the inquiry report. However, I continue to work closely with the town to ensure that all 36 recommendations are in fact implemented. Currently, this includes assisting with the town as it proceeds with a request for proposals for the recruitment of an integrity commissioner, lobbyist registrar, and fairness monitor. Next slide. So before I dive further into the details of my report, I just want to provide a quick overview of the function of the registry for the sake of any individuals listening in. So the registry is an online tool that documents substantive communication, such as telephone calls, meetings, or emails between those who lobby and town staff or council members in a centralized database that is easy to access and searched by the public and any interested stakeholders. Individuals and organizations who engage in lobbying are required to register their activities within 10 days of communications occurring. Next slide. In terms of my role as registrar, I'm responsible for overseeing the establishment and maintenance of the registry and for ensuring that the registry is available for public inspection on the town's website at all reasonable times. As registrar, I am also responsible for providing advice and interpretation as well as enforcement of the lobbyist registry bylaw and corresponding code of conduct, and delivering any education programs, outreach, and promoting the function of the registry overall. Next slide. So as mentioned, I am responsible as registrar for enforcing the lobbyist registry bylaw and the corresponding code of conduct. However, during 2020, no investigations were conducted or sanctions imposed. Given that the registry is in its now second year, the focus is very much on educating stakeholders on the purpose of the lobbyist registry and the code of conduct before actually issuing any penalties. Next slide. So with respect to education, my first year as lobbyist registrar has primarily been on educating stakeholders and promoting the registry as part of the town's enhanced accountability and transparency framework. Well, after assuming the role of accountability officer and lobbyist registrar in late March 2020, my immediate focus was on ensuring that information on the registry was clear and easily accessible. So key actions at this time included changes to the lobbyist registry's webpage to ensure that documents and information are easily accessible. We also launched a new searchable registry so that way individuals can quickly find the information that they're looking for. We also developed a number of educational tools and resources such as the one that you see on this screen here. I also offered advice and interpretation of the lobbyist registry bylaw to council members, to staff, and to various interested stakeholders. And I also delivered lobbyist registry training sessions. So between July and November 2020, council members and town staff from across all departments participated virtually in lobbyist registry training sessions. The purpose of these sessions is to increase overall awareness and understanding of the lobbyist registry bylaw and code of conduct. And this training is also available to the broader community of Collingwood, as well as any interested stakeholders and lobbyists. So next slide. With respect to outreach, over the past year, I met regularly with registrars and experts from across the province. So this included meetings with the City of Toronto, Ottawa, Burlington, Banh, Hamilton, Peel Region, and the Office of the Integrity Commissioner of Ontario. In January 2021, I also had the opportunity to participate in the inaugural meeting of the Municipal Lobbyist Registrars of Ontario. So this first meeting was hosted jointly by the City of Vaughan's Lobbyist Registrar and the City of Toronto's Lobbyist Registrar. It is a new forum that's intended to give Ontario's Lobbyist Registrars a forum to share collective experiences, jurisdictional updates, and best practice. This is a very important and exciting new area of accountability in Ontario, and so I felt very honored to have had the opportunity to represent the town of Collingwood at this first official meeting. At the same time in November, just going back one more note. At the same time, I also attended in November 2020, the Municipal Integrity Commissioners of Ontario meeting. So participants included municipal integrity commissioners and other municipal ethics and integrity experts from across the province who gather virtually from time to time to discuss best practices. The next slide. So just on a note, so as registrar, I am responsible again for overseeing the daily operations of the registry. with administrative support by clerk services and other town staff when required. My office, again, I started March 2020, so have been entirely virtual since day one. And I'm always accessible via email at accountability@collingwood.ca. And then at the same time, considerable support was given by IT and communications and clerk services again, in actually creating a very user-friendly, cost-effective tool for the town's website. So next slide. So with respect to registration activities. So in 2020, 76 lobbying communications were reported by 72 lobbyists. In total, 82 submissions were received by my office through the online registration system. However, 6 registrations were not accepted. In each of these cases, the communications described fell within the list of exempted activities under Part 2, Section 4 of the Lobbyist Registry bylaw. The next slide. So again, under the bylaw, any individuals who communicate with town staff or council members with the intent of doing business with the town must register their activities within 10 days. And under the bylaw, we group these lobbyists by type. So we have in-house lobbyists, who are individuals who are paid employees, partners, or sole proprietors of an organization and are lobbying on its behalf. We have consultant lobbyists. So these are individuals who lobby for payment on behalf of a client, and voluntary unpaid lobbyists, so individuals who lobby without payment on behalf of a business or for-profit entity. And so in the first year, we had 44 in-house lobbyists register. We had 29 consultant lobbyists and 3 voluntary unpaid lobbyists. Next slide. So when individuals register using our online system, they're also required to select a category under which their lobbying activities fall. So for 2020, the categories shown on the slide, which were most often reported, you'll see information technology was the greatest number reported with 12 registrations, and this was followed by transportation with 10. Other represents a large number of subject matter areas, and typically these were each about 2 per. Next slide. So our system also requires that individuals register their location, so where their company, or if they're lobbying on their own behalf, wherever they are located. So we had 23 lobbyists located in Collingwood, 11 in Toronto, 6 in Mississauga, and these are just the top lobbyists. We also had individuals register from New Zealand, and we had 3 individuals register from the United States. And next slide. So since 2012, Collingwood Town Council and town staff have consistently demonstrated their commitment to change through various initiatives, including the Lobbyist Registry, aimed at ensuring that the town's operations are transparent and compliant with applicable legislation, regulation, and best practice. And as a result, the town of Collingwood has very much emerged as a leader in its efforts to be accountable and transparent. On a final note, I would like to acknowledge the incredible support given by council members and town staff, as well as lobbyist registrars and integrity commissioners from across the province and the community of Collingwood. The fact that many other larger municipalities have implemented their registry ahead of Collingwood meant that they actually paved the way for us with greater resources, which allowed Collingwood to benefit from their experience and example. And through their guidance, the town was able to develop a municipal lobbyist registrar system that is user-friendly, cost-effective, and accommodates the intricacies of a small town. So again, with this move, the town of Collingwood has taken significant steps forward in ensuring good governance and has emerged as a leader in its efforts to be accountable and transparent. And with that, my final slide. Thank you very much for listening.
Jocelyn, thank you. You've had a busy first year. Clerk Almas, is there anyone in our gallery who would like to comment or ask questions about the presentation?
Yes, there is, Your Worship. And we will allow them to unmute themselves. And by pressing, perfect. They should be available to speak.
Hi, everyone. It's Matt Preddy here in town of Collingwood. Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you, Matt. Go ahead.
Mayor Saunderson, this answers, you're probably extremely excited right now because this person, I'm not quite sure about their next position, whether with Town of Collingwood or beyond Town of Collingwood. this just answered a big question that the judicial inquiry amassed and facilitated a way to defragment and to, kind of evaluate what's needed. So this registration and this lobbyist understanding, you must be so happy. And I'm happy to know that this person is a professional and added something of great significance to our town and the sustainability and future development of this town in various ways, commercially and industrially. Thank you very much. Continue. I'm happy to be here today. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Matthew. And Jocelyn, I don't know if you want to comment on that or the work to be done with the 36 recommendations, how that might impact our local lobbyist registry.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, Matthew, for your kind words. It is a very exciting initiative, and I think we have come a very long way with 76 registrations. The bulk of the recommendations made by Justice Morocco were in fact implemented prior to the delivery of his report. The final move that we're basically moving ahead with right now is the RFP process. So it basically will ensure that the role of the Integrity Commissioner and Lobbyist Registrar and Fairness Monitor will report directly to Council rather than through the town, just to ensure that we have independence.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the gallery that would like to speak on this item?
We do have another individual. If you wish to speak, please press the raise your hand feature. And I believe that's it that wish to speak to this item at this time.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments for Jocelyn? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson, and thank you, Jocelyn, for your terrific leadership in this. It's one of the things I found the most scary. So I've kind of received two prongs of advice, and I just wanted to ask you, the one advice, I've kind of held a hard line. If somebody calls me, and I think there's been two cases, I tell them they have to register, and when I have confirmation they're registered, then I'll speak to them. But then I got feedback maybe from you that said you can speak to them, they just have to register within 10 days. But I'm worried about my exposure if I talk to them and they never register, because the two people that did call me and I told them what to do, they didn't register because I went to look on the list. So as a member of council, is it too hard a line just to say register then call?
Jocelyn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. That is a very great question. So under our bylaw, pre-registration is not required. So we do ask that they register within 10 days of the initial communication occurring, and this is consistent with the City of Ottawa's approach. However, I do encourage pre-registration, although it's not required under the bylaw, just to ensure transparency and communication. So that way it gives you as council members and Mayor and Deputy Mayor, it gives you the comfort of knowing that that registration is in fact available on our system for public scrutiny. So again, while it's not required, it is encouraged that individuals do register in advance. And if you're ever in a situation where an individual, you have advised them to register and they have not done so, just contact my office and I'll be the one who actually can move ahead. So as of July 20th, 2020, my office is now able to actually impose sanctions. So this can be anything from communication bans ranging from 30 days to a number determined by my office. So there are options available to us. And so while my first year was very much focusing on education, there is going to be a shift towards ensuring greater compliance with the bylaw, which means actually following up with these individuals and imposing sanctions when required. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Clerk Thomas, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Certainly, Worship. I was just going to add, and Jocelyn touched on it. So for any public office holder, whether it's senior management or members of council, if you do refer someone to a lobbyist registry, even if you've had a conversation, make sure you bring it to the registrar's attention, and then we would follow up because we are looking at, our compliance and imposing sanctions as we move forward if necessary.
And on that note as well, Mr. Mayor, we don't want you as council members to have to be in the position to be actually enforcing the bylaw. That's very much the responsibility of the registrar. So by simply CCing me, what I will do is then follow up with the individual to make sure that they do in fact register.
Follow up, Councillor Jeffrey.
No, that's terrific. Thank you for the help.
Good. Any other questions or comments, council? Seeing none, then we do have a motion, and the motion is to receive the 2020 annual report of the Lobbyist Registrar for information. And can I get a mover and seconder? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Thank you very much, Jocelyn.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
You too. This brings us to item 5, the consent agenda. And the motion is that council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. There's 3 items on the consent agenda. 5.1, Statistics Canada 2021 Census of Population. 5.2, Perth County, significant negative impacts of current value assessment in rural communities. And 5.3, Tim Fryer, Collingwood Judicial Inquiry Input Part 6. So these, first we'll receive the agenda, and then I'll ask if there's items to be pulled. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Comey and Councillor Madigan. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you. Any items to be pulled, council? We do have a motion for 5.1, the Statistics Canada 2021 Census of Population. And that is that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood supports the 2021 census and encourages all residents to complete their census questionnaire online at www.census.gc.ca, providing accurate and complete census data, support programs, and services that benefit our community. I get a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty. Any questions or comments before I call the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to highlight the fact that in the report, StatsCan refers to the number of jobs that will be created, and to make sure our residents know that there can be job opportunities available through this process when it occurs, and they should follow up on that if they're interested.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 6.1, staff report C 2021-5 annual report 2020 non-standard emergency purchases report. And I'll turn it over to Claire Thomas to introduce the matter.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the annual report that we provide as an effort to ensure that there is transparency in all of our procurement, especially when there's items that don't go through a competitive process. They have to meet the requirements of the bylaw. So today we'll be having our purchasing officer, Rose Hewitson, present a brief PowerPoint to address this. And as Rose joins our meeting, we will put up the PowerPoint presentation, but I'd also like to recognize Rose's efforts. She's been with the town just over 5 years, and she's had 20 years experience in public procurement. And so she's definitely been an asset to the town of Collingwood. Rose?
Good afternoon, Mayor Saunders and Deputy Hall and members of council. Yes. Our annual report, really pleased to present this to council. We do this annually as part of our accountability back to council and the public. Next slide, please. So in accordance with the town's procurement bylaw, we are obligated to provide an annual information report. And what we're reporting on is non-standards, procurements greater than 2,500 and emergency purchases greater than 2,500 that didn't go through a regular procurement stream as dictated in the bylaw. This annual report is intended to provide some clarity and explanation behind some of the reasoning when we're looking at each procurement process throughout the given year. Next slide, please. There are times when a non-competitive process is in fact very efficient and an effective use of staff resources, time, and effort spent for staff. As always, our default is following the bylaw and following the particular competitive stream that's indicated in the bylaw. But as I said, there are times when it almost becomes ineffective. So there are very specific reasons why we would choose a non-standard. Next slide, please. So what is, what is non-standard purchasing? To be honest, the majority of the purchases that the town undertakes go through a standard procurement process identified in the bylaw. And it is only, when we look at the entire budget, it is only a very small percentage that end up going through a non-standard process. So in our bylaw, we have those specific situations labeled as Schedule C. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview. I certainly don't want to go through every example, but a really good example would be when we have gone out to market and we've received no bids for whatever reason. It could be a shift in the marketplace. It could just be that the right bidder just did not see the advertise. We advertise electronically through Bid and Go. So our visibility is huge regarding getting our projects out in front of the right bidder. So there are 9 specific situations that if we fit within this category, then we can move forward with a non-standard procurement where it makes sense. Next slide, please. So we've been tracking this data since 2008 when we first started reporting. Sara did mention I've been with the town for 5 years, and in 2008 we did our first report. And I like this slide because it demonstrates that each year the level of our non-standard will depend on what is going on with our budget. So there are years, for instance, in 2020, we replaced the water membrane trains at the water treatment plant. Very, very expensive piece of equipment we replaced. So the value is going to be a little higher in 2020 as compared to maybe 19 and 18. So I like this slide because it demonstrates it will be, the number of non-standards will go up and go down just depending on what we have in our budget itself. Next slide, please. So the other area that we report on is emergency procurement. And we have a definition in our bylaw so everybody's understanding of what deems an emergency. And really the bottom line is when there is a negative effect on the public health and safety, the welfare of persons or public property, we have emergency maintenance required of town services or equipment, security to the town's interests, financial or otherwise. So where we've got to react really now to preserve. Next slide, please. So we did have a few emergency procurements in 2020. And again, we're tracking data 2018, 19, and 20. The big one for 2020 was the remedial work that we did at the shoreline for Sunset Point. And again, that's a really good example of an emergency procurement where to delay and go through the regular procurement process would have just allowed for the environment and the weather to erode away more of our shoreline, which was already in a really drastic state. Next slide, please. So we had a total of 2,254,360 for the non-standard and 185,000 for emergency. So in 2020, basically 2,440,000, so almost 2.5 million. But as I said, we had some very expensive equipment that's very specialized replaced in 2020. Next slide, please. So that's the end of the PowerPoint presentation. You've been provided with the report, the listing of our different non-standard procurements and our emergencies. Are there any questions, or is there anything you'd like me to clarify?
Thank you, Rose. We'll start first, Sarah, looking to see if there's anyone from the gallery that would like to comment or ask a question, and then we'll get to council.
Certainly, Your Worship. It doesn't look like anybody from our gallery wishes to speak to council regarding this matter at this time.
All right, thank you. Council, questions or comments for Rose? Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So through you to Rose, I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on the process for a non-standard. Does that, it's initiated, I would assume, through the department? Is it purchasing that makes the decision that a non-standard purchase will be necessary, or is it the department and then makes recommendation to? I guess what I'm looking for is a sense of, validation of the need for non-standard.
Sure. Through Your Worship to Councillor Doherty. Generally, I get a reach out from staff to say we've got this situation and we'd like to talk about a non-standard. So I collect the data, the information, the background, and then we turn to our listing of 9 to see, does it fit within there, and why are we considering a non-standard? So that's the first question I want to get out of the play. Are we truly in that non-standard? Is there another strategy we could take? Is there perhaps maybe a cooperative program we can take? Like, it shouldn't be the default to go to a non-standard. It should be the exception. And so we flush that conversation out to make sure that it truly should be a non-standard. And then we look at the 9 criteria to see, do we fit within those 9 criteria? And if it's truly a non-standard situation, it'll fit in there. So it's an agreement between myself and the staff, and we do have a specific form that we have the department complete. It's signed by the department head so that I know a department head has supported this decision. And then I sign off on it if I'm in support as well, and then we then submit to CAO Skinner. And quite often I do recommend that the department head discuss with CAO Skinner prior to even receiving the form, just so there's a lot of communication and understanding on why we're deviating again away from the regular procurement process that we normally would have taken. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to Rose. Hi, Rose. It's been a long time.
Hello.
I have a question. I'm going to preface it with something. There was, you've probably seen it, there was a story in Collingwood today with the headline Town Reports about 2.2 million in non-competitive purchases last year. And then there was a comment in here, and it leads me to my question to you that says, why is this happening? Collingwood just spent millions on a judicial inquiry, and here are staff purchasing whatever they like without putting anything out there for quotes. My question to you goes further than that. Since the judicial inquiries ended and the recommendations and whatnot, have you gotten any feedback from maybe your peer purchasing officers or organizations that you deal with about if they felt that there was anything helpful in your area that came out of the JI?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Berman. So was there, if I can rephrase that to make sure that I understand your question, was there anything of benefit to help my area that came out of the JI? Is that what you asked?
I guess sort of a mix of that, and have you just received any feedback from, people that do what you do, because a lot of the JI was to do with procurement part 2. I wondered if there was any talk about things that they learned that could improve or that should have already been done. I just wondered if you had a lens to comment on that from.
So when we went through and looked at the JI and compared it to the purchasing procurement program that we're trying to continue to launch here in Collingwood, there was a considerable amount of those recommendations that were already completed here. And if you turn to best practices across Ontario in public procurement, you'll find that all of us procurement people, our goals are completely aligned with the JI recommendations. It's not a program that you turn a switch on and boom, there it is. It takes a lot of development and training and education with staff. So if anything, it was an affirmation that we're on the right path. We're doing the right thing. And that's shared among myself and my peers.
I like that answer. Thank you. And that's good for me.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Clerk Thomas, you had something to add?
Certainly, Your Worship. I'll just quickly add to that. So both rows, together with our purchasing coordinator, are very involved in their associations, and there has been communications that they have forwarded on to me that their professionals have been looking at as well. So it is interesting. There is a few items that we are going to be exploring, have already looked at actually, but we'll be exploring in the near future. That because public procurement, we know that there will be times where non-standard or emergency purchases are absolutely required. It's just how best to expose that transparency of that process. So there is a few items that we'll be looking at, but it is a recognized procurement obligation that many municipalities, actually all municipalities, have to undertake at certain points.
Thanks, Sarah. Council, any more questions or comments on this particular item? Seeing none. Rose, thank you for that, and thank you for your work. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years, but lots of change in those 5 years. You've been very busy.
Thank you very much.
We do have a resolution, and that is the council hearing received staff report C 2021-5, annual report of non-standard and emergency purchases for information. Any mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Berman and Councillor Madigan, all in favor? That is carried unanimously, and thank you, Rose. And this brings us to item 7.1, departmental updates, Collingwood Judicial Inquiry Report, next steps update. CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I thought it was important to bring to Council's attention and the public's attention a number of the things that have been happening in the background as we vigorously pursue next steps on the Judicial Inquiry Report. But I wanted to start off with making sure that residents continue to have clear information about the Judicial Inquiry Report itself. And I want to remind people about what the Justice Morocco said when he introduced the report on November 2nd. He said that there were significant matters addressed in the report. They included unfair bidding and procurement practices that existed at that moment in time, conflicts of interest, inaccurate and misleading town council reports, misuse and inappropriate disclosure of the town's confidential information, inaccuracies, and failures to respect the roles and responsibilities of council members and staff. And he said that unaddressed, this type of behavior would undermine the foundational core and reputation of a municipal government. So being here now in Collingwood, I would say that the commitments that Collingwood has had to the judicial inquiry process have already changed our culture. They pushed us to the forefront of accountable, transparent, and ethical behaviors in Collingwood, and very much so for a municipality of our size. I actually heard Clerk Almas talking with a couple of folks from the county lately, And one of the concerns that I'm going to mention in a moment had to do with, the difficulty of having a lobbyist registry in a smaller municipality. And she was talking about how she and you heard from Jocelyn McCauley had found some ways to implement things like a lobbyist registry that are very helpful to council in a cost-effective way. So that's very important. And it also means that when the things that were the subject of the judicial inquiry happened in this town and people acted that inappropriately according to the justice's interpretation of it, that they were called on it and actions have been taken to move us forward to a new place. And I also want to remind listeners that Justice Morocco would not have included any criminal findings, as a judicial inquiry would explicitly stay away from those types of findings. So getting back to the direction from council, after the last update that Clerk Almus and I brought forward, council, you had asked for a few things. One was that our counsel from the judicial inquiry, so that's Mr. Will McDowell and Mr. Ryan Breeden, would come and speak with council. So you'll of course recall that a week or two ago, they did provide some statements to you in open session. And then in the closed session, per the agenda that was published, folks would know there'd been some legal strategy advice provided in that closed session to council. You had also asked that staff approach our former CAOs, Farida Min and Mr. John Brown, to come and speak with council. And there has been, Clerk Almost, you could confirm, March 9th special SIC session set up that will include an open session where the public can participate, as well as a closed session with those two persons if the topics that they wish to talk on with council are deemed appropriate by the clerk to be considered in closed session. We've also worked with the mayor and the deputy mayor to support advocacy, and the mayor had provided a motion to county council around earlier mid-February seeking support from the county council, and that was referred to county staff for review with a report back in March. To county council, and some of their questions included, what might be the financial or legal implications for local municipalities in Simcoe County. And to that end, Clerk Almus and I met with CAO Mark Aiken and John Daly, the clerk at the county, to talk through the types of reviews that they were doing. And Clerk Almus has committed to meet with the county legal counsel to talk through the recommendations and the work that she's already done to analyze those and how they might be acted upon. And as well, Clerk Almost will be presenting to the County Clerks and Treasurers Association to get feedback on that front from a swath of well-qualified municipal experts across the county. I know that council, you're still waiting for a number of those items to come to your attention prior to confirming if you would like to take any civil actions. And we're all still waiting for the OPP investigation conclusion and any announcements on that front. I haven't heard back from the OPP in the last week or two, other than I know that they were waiting to finalize their report so that they could make their conclusions. We also were looking at a few of the other considerations that we might pursue under insurance or other avenues going forward after consultations with a few folks. We've also been very active in engaging with groups across Ontario. So Clerk Almus and I have been working on driving implementation of the Justice's recommendations with AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And to that end, we're able to meet with their policy director. She indicated that they had a very busy legislative agenda coming up, but there was interest. With AMCTO, Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers of Ontario. the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association. We also met with 2 provincial directors at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, both Central Region and the Policy Division. And I understand, and the mayor had updated you lately, I believe that he has met or communicated with several MPPs and ministers at the provincial level. And we had also considered whether it would be useful to talk to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. While they have a different, a broader perspective, some of our learnings we think could be useful to consider in any jurisdiction. So with all of those meetings, we did find a couple of themes. Everyone we met with definitely had the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry on their radar. Everyone had at least read the summary report, and several of them talked about having had conversations with their boards of directors or governance groups. The more informed of them realized that the issues were not Collingwood's alone. Everyone felt that there was a need to act, and to act more broadly than Collingwood. There were some cautions. They included that other judicial inquiries had already had some of the same findings. And further, that Ontario's Bill 68, that's the one that set out the integrity commissioners and a number of other reforms, had, quote, someone else's words, only been in place for 2 years. So they weren't sure it was effective yet, but we did feel that between Clerk Elmas and myself and her staff, that we needed to do a review of the recommendations, looking at which ones were beyond Bill 68. Most of these groups were willing to be on a working group, and we were starting to put together some supporting information that talked about the compelling reasons to act, the differences from Bill 68, the parallels with previous JIs, and the compelling legs and regs changes that could, legislation and regulation changes that could go forward as soon as possible. The most unusual conversation was with a few of the provincial staff. So we're talking at the staff level. They did want to address their own recommendations to the province. You'll be aware that there's, I think, about 19 or 20 that are directed specifically to the province. But they had made no commitment to any public activities or consultation, or for that matter, to the one-year report back at this time. So we think that we'd like to continue to talk to the province at the staff and at the political levels to increase their level of support. So pending council receiving the other advice that they've already asked for and the OPP conclusions, we remain convinced as staff that actioning most of the 306 recommendations do require county level, provincial level, and potentially national perspectives, potentially on a working group or different groups that look at the various white papers we've recommended, and that Collingwood absolutely continues to have a role in driving engagement. We're not positive that these recommendations will get all of the attention that they require without council's continued support. And so we're working as was dictated by council with the mayor and the deputy mayor in vigorously pursuing this follow-up. And I hope that you'll be satisfied with the level of action since our last discussion on this. And we look forward to the next few steps. Thank you.
Sonia, thank you for that update. You've been busy. Council, comments or questions for Sonia? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for the update. Through you to our CAO. When reaching out to other levels of government, other policymakers, et cetera, and receiving feedback, have any of them indicated to you that, you know, we appreciate that this is important, we appreciate that this is something we should be looking at, but quite frankly, it's not on the radar right now because of COVID?
Sonia?
Thank you, Your Worship. To the Deputy Mayor, I think that the place that was most strongly communicated was at the province, that they were quite engaged with COVID recovery and business recovery, and had felt that Bill 68 moved substantially in the right direction, and we're less concerned with the next step forward. Unless Clerk Almus can think of another one, but I believe the province was the one.
Sara?
The only one I would add, it was AMO is quite tied up in a lot of policy discussions as well, and but they definitely showed some interest in what was going to happen and being part of that conversation. So we're looking forward to their involvement.
Follow up, Deputy Mayor. Council, any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for the update and for all the work that's being done, Sonia and Sara, on that. And I think that brings us to item 8, public delegations. Is there anyone in the gallery that wants to speak today, Sara?
Yes, Your Worship. It looks like Matthew Pretty would like to speak.
Okay, thank you.
All right, he should be able to unmute himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sara, is my line on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, great organization, guys, town council and departments for the Monday meeting. I had a very difficult weekend, and I'm very happy to be here. I almost had a personal fatality this weekend due to a very extraordinary situation that I won't go into, but again, I'm glad to be here. The virtual connection that we have is brilliant. Our new CAO is doing a phenomenal job. Her focus and interest really illuminates, the contemporary state we're in. So with strategic initiatives tonight, I would like to suggest that, yes, we have a past. I'm just thinking about shadow. I was just looking out on the deck here. I'm like, shadow. When we get into office work, municipal affairs, we forget about the shadow, the outdoor, the intensity of weather. Right now, we've got a windstorm. I think UPCOR is doing a great job. Part of the judicial inquiry was about the power board, lobbying, financial interests with regards to the deal with the power company. UPCOR is out there replacing poles. I saw them last week in a bitter cold day, pole replacements. I think at the end of the day, when we're dealing with issues such as homelessness, no fixed address, houses being sold that people have been renting, home ownership, being thankful for a warm, safe environment to live in. Look at the Texas storm that just happened. That's mind-blowing. And the attention that we need is thankfulness. I really like our CAO, Sonia Skinner. She has this thankfulness, this honest and helpful manner. Yes, we went through turbulent times with financial issues, overspending. The Elvis Festival was a bit excessive. I do agree. And then, procurement of things such as essential, non-essential. I'm going to wrap this up, but I just want to let you guys know, here with you, I'm in support of the town, always been in support of our town councils and departments. I want you all to know that we need to love each other and embrace every day, because one day we will not be here. Okay, we need to be more thankful and aware that life is limited. Please understand that, and please, let's move forward with a sense of gladness, especially in the COVID times, especially with various personal issues and larger issues internationally. We all need to take a breath, and we need to calm down and really, really be satisfied with where we are right now. Thank you, everyone. Be safe out there and keep working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Sara, do we have any other?
Certainly, we do have another attendee. If you wish to speak to the Strategic Initiatives Committee, please press the raise your hand feature. And there's no further individual wishing to participate at this point.
Thank you, Sarah. That brings us to item 9, other business, and we have the province's gray zone lockdown announcement of last Friday, and CAO Skinner, I think, has some information to start us off on this discussion. So I'll pass it over to you, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a couple items. This has happened so quickly that our comms manager, Krista Carter, has helped me put together some slides. So I think I will just share my own screen here. You'll bear with me for one moment. Okay, do you have a view of that slide now? Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So as we're all more than aware, on Friday around after the end of the workday, the province pulled something that they called the emergency brake that put ourselves in the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit into gray or lockdown. And they noted that as being related to the presence of variants in the community. So the couple of the changes that happened are noted on this slide. I have 2 slides of the changes, but in us moving from red, which have been yesterday, to today, which is the new gray, which is a little bit different than our old gray. We've moved from restaurants and bars being able to have up to 10 people indoors to them being closed indoor and outdoors, although takeouts can still operate. Sports and rec and fitness facilities have moved from 10 people in classes to being closed. And stores have moved from limits of 75 or 50% to 50 to 25%, depending on the type of store. So a lot less customers can be in the store. And personal care services have moved from being closed, but with hairdressers open, to all personal care services being closed. So the big thing that we've been hearing as staff over the weekend and through many of, also through many of the council members, is this issue of unpredictability. So shaping up through the fall, there was identifiable data that had driven the provincial decisions. There was 5 or 6 criteria that would place you in, green, orange, red, etc. And while we do remain appreciative of our health experts' advice, and they've stewarded us through this process well, we don't know how the UK variant is being considered or how the latest decisions could decrease our COVID risk. So according to media reports, there were UK variants reported around February 10th in Collingwood, and that was 24 cases. And it's been over 2 weeks since that. And we have not had any new infections in the past week that have been noted as a UK variant. We don't know when the next decision will be made. So our businesses have no idea how long, the ones that are affected have no idea how long they'll be affected. And our local businesses have been starting to communicate that they can't last through another closure. And I think some of the folks on council will possibly have heard more than I have about this. We don't have real statistics at this point, just one working day in. Another of the factors that's very important is we're inherently linked with the town of Blue Mountains. And in this little graphic, if you know your geography well, you'll see that all the way up to the Bruce Peninsula and through Grey County is green. We're in gray, and all around us largely is red, orange, and green. So we are 5 minutes away here in Collingwood from businesses that are open in Blue Mountains. We have lots of people potentially traveling from the city. And council has twice formally through resolution asked the province to potentially limit travel. And now we're in the situation where this provincial framework is potentially encouraging travel while simultaneously restricting Collingwood's own businesses. I have had some conversation in passing with the OPP about their enforcement of the gray zone, and they are just at the process today of finalizing how they're going to be working that out, with half of the detachment in the green zone and half of it in the gray zone. And we'll be talking with our own bylaw folks as well. Now, there are still a number of programs that remain available to Collingwood businesses, and our Manager of Economic Development, Brendan Kenny, provided these to me this morning. And they include the Regional Relief and Recovery Program through CBED, that's federal. It's almost at capacity, so businesses would be encouraged to apply to that. The Canadian Emergency Rent Subsidy, which you can now do directly. You don't need to go through your landlord. And of course, our Digital Main Street that helps businesses digitize their operations. So we'll continue through Brendan to advertise those to businesses in our area. Because of our bonusing guidelines that are set out in the Municipal Act, we can't provide subsidies directly to businesses. And we can also refresh as staff our Shop Local campaigns, because we do want to support our local businesses. And finally, I was circulated this morning, Deputy Mayor Hull and Clerk Almas were both at a BIA meeting earlier today. And I believe council members may have already received this resolution that will be on our special meeting later tonight, but I thought it worthwhile here just to show you, and the folks that were at that meeting may wish to speak to it further. But there was two resolutions that are at the bottom of this slide that they petitioned the Chief Medical Officer of Health in the province of Ontario to scope out and remove the town of Collingwood from the gray lockdown restrictions, and return Collingwood to the red zone immediately, and that the BIA Board of Management would petition you to support the board with the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit and the province of Ontario directly. And that is the end of my update. However, I do think that pardon me, I do believe that we do have significant concern by businesses and some capacity for potential non-compliance because of the level of frustration. And with that, I'll turn it back to council. You've certainly heard as much or more from our businesses than I have over the last 2 or 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia, for that update. Council, my thought in addressing this in the SIC was that we could have a fulsome discussion, and there'd be an opportunity for people to put motions on the floor that we can address and vote on during the SIC, and then progress to ratify at the special meeting tonight. So I think this is an opportunity for us to look at taking some action. I know, as CAO Skinner noted, we've been getting lots of communications, particularly from those businesses that are most impacted. I've had a number of emails from fitness centers and gyms, hairstyling companies, personal service companies, restaurants, and the hospitality industry, all indicating that this is an unexpected blow, that it's putting pressures on them that they don't think they'll survive. And I think we need to look hard at taking some action here today. So with that, I'll open the floor for discussion, and hopefully we can get some positive actions on the agenda for tonight's SIC meeting. So comments or questions, council, or proposals? I'm opening the floor. Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So in terms of process here, I mean, clearly, I think as a town, we're definitely behind in the leadership of messaging. It wasn't that we weren't talking about it. We didn't have the resources or the communications capacity to get out in front of it. And so now we're being deemed by many people I've spoken to in the public as really not caring or not getting out in front of it soon enough. So whatever we do, we need to ensure people that we were working on it. We were messaging with everyone we could. And working our way to this meeting. So number one, extremely happy to support the BIA's motion, but I think we need to be doing our own similar one. I mean, people are so frustrated. Someone recommended to me today that going forward, we should be advocating that the medical officer of health for Simcoe County should be an elected position, whether it's through the county or something, that there's a disconnect between our what's happening on the ground here. And I know there's science, and I think they've made the rules, but they haven't enforced the rules, and that's the feedback I'm getting. So whether we tell them that you've made the right rules, we've supported them all along, just enforce them, because if you don't enforce them, we haven't got the power to control the people coming here. So that's the frustration I've been hearing. I liked Mayor Graydon Smith and Mayor Lehman were way out in front of this. I liked the positive approach that Mayor Lehman took in motivating the community to support the businesses through his 2x4 program. And I think the highest form of flattery is to copy something that's good. And I'd like to see us adopt a challenge to our community if they can afford, maybe it won't be a 2x4, maybe it'll be a 2x3 in terms of asking them to continue to call people that they know, a friend or family, just to check in on them, make sure they're okay. Again, we were doing the hashtag Takeout Wednesdays, but to continue to support our restaurants and pick up if we can curbside to save them delivery stresses, and to continue to donate to Collingwood charities. And I know people have been absolutely fabulous about that during this whole time. And there were other suggestions there. So just something to consider, and maybe after I hear everybody else's conversation, I'll come up with a formal recommendation to go to our special council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I was going to suggest, similar to Councillor Jeffrey, that we we draft our own motion that would be very similar to the BIA motion, and send that to the province and to our medical officer of health. And I think Councillor Jeffrey has also made a couple of other suggestions. I'm not sure whether they would work into a motion per se, but one way or another, they are good suggestions for us as municipal council to get on top of. So if Councillor Jeffrey is making a motion, I'm happy to second that motion.
Yeah, I think we're going to go around and then we'll come back, and we may have a number of resolutions on the floor. So thank you, Councillor Doherty. Council, further questions or comments? Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson and Council. I appreciate the influx of calls and messages that we've been getting. It's a well-known fact that I've operated businesses in Collingwood for well over 25 years. And it's not about getting the messaging out to the businesses that I work with and have worked with every day about us caring. They're scared. They're at the point where they feel that they're drowning, they cannot keep up. And it's really tough owning a business in a town where the messaging from our medical officer is to be very afraid and stay in and don't go anywhere, but yet our streets are full of people from the zones that are being affected by this. And it really sucks that when businesses are told to close, that any given day on the weekend, you can see an ample amount of people from communities in the GTA walking around us. So forget about that we're being lumped in with Barrie and 5 minutes away is wide open. These people are coming to use our facilities and our banks, and there's nothing that we can do about it. I've had a very customer-centric attitude towards, and we get customers up all the time, and we always say, hey, where are you from? What brings you into our store? And they're all from Toronto right now. They're all coming here to spend their money, which is really hard for the businesses up here to turn them away. But then the people in Collingwood don't want to come out and support because they're afraid that they're going to get COVID because of the messaging that Dr. Gardner is sending. So I will agree that we might not have been too proactive in our messaging, but that's not the point. The point is these businesses in town are afraid that they're not going to open up again. This is their livelihood. I've been doing this for so long. I don't have an education. My education is sales. And when all of a sudden you just do lockdown after lockdown after lockdown, and there's no hope in sight, when we're seeing the numbers diminish, it's really tough for people to grasp on that they say, oh my gosh, council cares, so life is good. They want this over. They want this to be done with, and they want us to stand behind. And we've, over the last 12 months, there's businesses in the downtown that have been closed for 6 months out of those 12 months. So the messaging that we have today better be very to the point. And politics aside, whoever we are worried about, let's just say we need to be open, because everybody, everywhere else is open. And I don't care that Walmart's open and not small businesses can't. It's either everybody's closed or everybody's open. We're all in this together, and we have to treat it like that. And we can't position ourselves this group versus that group. But our businesses are petrified that they can't reopen. I've got guys that are so strong in business for longer than me, and they're wondering, am I going to reopen? Do I even want to reopen? COVID's totally changed retail and service. Do I want to do this? The overwhelming answer is no. So whatever message we decide to put out, please be forceful with that message, because it doesn't really matter if we don't prove the point that we need to be open. This town is based around tourism. And when we can't open because the tourism is what's hurting us, there's no hope in sight for businesses downtown. I just beg and implore that we just don't take a soft approach to this. It's time to say something of substance rather than just we're trying. Because as a business owner, I don't really care that we're trying. I want something done. So I appreciate your time letting me speak, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I guess because it was sort of a late edition, didn't anticipate we'd be doing an SIC vote. And I think because my daughter worked Saturday and the Y is closed now and it would reopen with this motion, that I'm going to declare a conflict and step away.
Okay. Councillor Hamlin.
This is such a difficult, terrible issue. What can we say? You know, with the opening of the ski hills, which, you know, we all appreciate everyone to be outside, it has really meant that we are open for business up here. And for the province and our health officer to be pretending we're not open for business, it's pretty crazy, really. I am so fully in support of us being in whatever zone for lockdown or openness that the town of the Blue Mountain is in. Everyone who lives up here, works up here, is a student, is a visitor, a tourist. We all travel between the town of Blue Mountains and Collingwood for everything, whether it's retail, restaurants, medical services, the hospital. It's one community, and we need to get that message out to, I'm going to say downtown Toronto and the legislature. And I think it was the mayor of Wasaga Beach's statements I saw on the weekend where she was suggesting we invite the premier up here because maybe he hasn't seen a map. And I thought, that is really, you know, the problem with people who don't live in this region making decisions. They don't understand how we're functioning as an economic and social unit. And maybe it just means getting our chief medical officer of health over here. Maybe he's in Barrie and needs a little view. But I think we need to get on the phone. And Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at you, I guess. When York Region was complaining several months ago that it was going to be tied into the colors of Toronto and Peel, what I read was that all the mayors in York Region got on the phone and gave a bit of a blast to the Premier's office, or maybe it was the Minister of Health, and York Region has been treated very separately. And my suggestion would be that we have our mayor and he approach perhaps the Clearview mayor and the mayor of Wasaga Beach and try and get some numbers together on a call to say this is unacceptable for our community. The numbers for our health region are clearly and have since the beginning been driven by the communities that are the extension of the GTA, and it's Barrie, you know, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, Innisfil. You don't have to be a genius to look at it and say that's their problem. Ours is totally different. And anyway, that's you know, my main focus. The other thing that's always on my mind is the ever-changing nature of these regulations. And you have to be a total student of what's happening to understand it. Even a few weekends ago when we went into, as it turns out, I'm starting to learn, is called stay-at-home order. I had a family member reach out and say, I'm doing some tutoring. Am I allowed to go to people's homes? I spent all afternoon on that. Because they were getting parents who were pretty smart professional people saying, no, I know you can be open. Here's what it says. Who can keep track of this? You know, I'm very much agree with Councillor Madigan's comment. We should just be open and let's get on with it, because we now know, our businesses know how to keep ourselves safe. And you know, we could have some very plain health rules that we could enforce, our businesses could understand, and whether it's everyone's 50% open, like to me, that makes, you know, the most sense. But we just need something simple for our residents, our businesses, our visitors, and everyone who lives and works on surrounding municipalities to follow. So anyway, that's my rant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. And just by way of update, I was on the phone with the CAO this morning with Dr. Gardner at the health unit. I was also participating in a county meeting this morning, and over the weekend there has been discussions, and I understand that Gordon Cornell will be meeting or speaking today with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So there are many wheels in place here. And I guess I would also note that I think when we were voting to give me my powers under the Municipal Act, there were 2 no votes, and you were one of them, Councillor Hamlin. All right, and who's next?
Sorry, I just have to ask you, when we were voting for what?
Voting to restore my powers as mayor under the Municipal Act, there were 2 opposed votes, and you were one of them. So when you look to the mayor as being your spokesperson, I would expect that you give universal support for that throughout the term, not just when it's convenient.
Well, anyway, I don't know what you're talking about, but maybe I'll email you and find out, because I couldn't ever imagine me not voting for the mayor to have powers. But anyway, in fact, I think you should have your staff, we could have a whole just, you know, council meeting on support for our councillors and for our mayor in terms of what we need to get our job done. And I'm fully in support of you having what you need. So I'm sorry if I earlier intimated something differently.
Well, thank you for that. And I think there's power in us doing this as council and working with our neighbors. So I certainly agree with that. Who was next? Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in agreement with Councillor Madigan, who just touched on the very issue that just came up, our town is looking for us to show solidarity at this time and to stand together. And unless there's going to be a dissenting opinion on this, I think it's imperative that our community do hear, perhaps like Councillor Hamlin was touching on, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Doherty, more than a strongly worded letter has been sent. I mean, I think we're allowed to gather outside because we qualify as a group of 10 or less. If you need us down at town hall, standing outside with our masks on, showing solidarity, holding up a sign saying open for business. If you need visual representation, I, for one, would be more than welcome to do so. I think it falls within the guidelines, and I certainly hope any motion we're going to put, and usually Councillor Jeffrey and Doherty are good at these sort of details, contains a date. It's so concerning for me to hear what CAO Skinner said. It's unimaginable that our businesses are trying to digest something with no end point. It's unfathomable. So whatever we put together now in the strongly worded letter framework should absolutely require that we need action by such and such a date. And Mr. Mayor, you'll have some insight into that based on your recent phone calls then about what would be appropriate for us to get an answer on this. And again, to my point, I think we should make some sort of visual representation to our community to show them, they haven't seen us. We're just a little square on a screen for, months on end, and we're all over email, and maybe it needs to be a little more visual. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you have your card up? Go ahead.
Thank you. I won't, for the benefit of the 70 of you still listening, I won't repeat my rants from the weekend, but we'll just briefly touch on a few points. I think that one, I'd like to see us put forward a motion today requesting that we be returned to red effective immediately. Two, that I think that, and again, this is not a comment for the people of the Blue Mountains, but it's a comment directed at the Premier of Ontario specifically. I'm sure that somebody got him a map and was able to show him where St. Bart's was located. I would ask that same person to get a map and show him where Blue Mountain Resort is as it relates to the town of Collingwood and perhaps Wasaga Beach and Clearview Township. And I think that an explanation from the province needs to be forthcoming as to the rationale for the decision behind returning all of Grey Bruce to green when we know that the area immediately adjacent to Collingwood is a playground. It's a playground to the province. And as such, yes, we both greatly benefit from that playground, but there are also times when it's a great negative at the same time. And this is one. And it's one in twofold. One is that we've created sort of an open playing field for people to come. And yet at the same time, we've literally put handcuffs and restraints on very similar businesses within our own municipality that would traditionally benefit from those people who are coming to the community, but at this time have been handcuffed for various reasons that I don't think are scientifically supported. In other words, I don't think that the current level of COVID, specifically in the town of Collingwood, justifies a gray when our neighbors with the host of a playground have been returned to green. So I think that we need to specifically request that the province provide an explanation for the rationale behind that decision. And they owe the explanation not to us, they owe the explanation to the residents of Collingwood. Quite frankly, they owe the explanation to the residents of the town of Blue Mountain. They owe the explanation to our neighbors in Wasaga Beach and Clearview. I made the comment this morning at the BIA meeting that if I was a councillor in the Blue Mountains or a resident in the Blue Mountains, I'd be terrified the fact that I've been turned to a green zone. They have done so well in terms of curtailing and keeping their numbers low through this entire pandemic. And yet overnight, literally their municipality has just been opened up. And again, we're not talking about a facility such as Snow Valley or Chicopee. Snow Valley supports Barrie, Chicopee supports Kitchener, for example. I mean, this is a destination and a playground for the entire province. And I remember, quite frankly, when I worked there 25 years ago, the marketing was that there were X number of million people that could drive to this resort within an 8-hour radius. And that's why Interwest bought when they did and why they did. And then I think the other clear message that we've got to send today is that it is absolutely cruel. And I think that it's a tough word to use, but it is absolutely cruel. Councillor Madigan's already raised the issue about certain businesses that have been closed for 6 months during this pandemic, when quite frankly, when they have been open, the time and the effort and the energy and the money, the capital outlay that they have put in or that they have had to borrow to keep their doors open so that they can pay the rent, they can pay the mortgage, they can put food on the table for their family. There is no justification, in my opinion, for the province to have single-handedly taken, for an example, the hairstyling industry. And I don't have a lot of experience with that particular industry, but I can imagine how difficult it would be to survive when you, quite frankly, are being zeroed out for no reason at all. And for those who I have spoken with and I have met and who I've seen, you know, I say I've been so impressed in terms of, again, the time, the energy, the resources that they have put in to make sure that not only are they safe, that their staff are safe, but that the community as a whole is safe. And the part that bothers me the most about an industry such as the hairstyling industry is that this is an industry who is servicing the local market. They're not servicing a broader market. And to think that for some reason that they have been isolated, and there are many others, I'm not zeroing specifically on them, but there are many others. It's downright cruel. In my email over the weekend, I said that to you that generally speaking, throughout this pandemic, whether you are of a red stripe or a blue stripe, I've been generally very supportive of the actions to date. And the same would be true of Dr. Gardner. However, the issue that I take with Dr. Gardner is that when we were in lockdown and when we were coming out of lockdown, let's not fool ourselves. This isn't something that came out of the blue on Thursday or Friday. He's made it very clear prior to coming out of lockdown that he didn't want us to come out of lockdown. And had he had his way, we wouldn't be in the gray that we are in today. We would be in the gray that is a full lockdown. And my question to him would be, where are the numbers to justify such a severe lockdown, specifically throughout a large geographical region? Over the course of the weekend, he hosted, I believe yesterday, a Facebook session where he was trying to explain the rationale behind his decision. He was on CBC Ontario this morning, again, trying to explain the rationale. And there is validity behind what he is saying. But it is also time that I wish he would be more proactive and responsive and recognize what the mayor of Bracebridge has been saying all along, what we need to say today. And that is that he needs to look at to the geography that is huge and say, you know what, within my geographical region, I've got to go to the premier and say, you know what, I need to isolate. We need this to be in gray. I'm comfortable in returning this to red. And quite frankly, the health minister, or sorry, not minister, but the doctor over in Grey Bruce, in my humble opinion, should have done the same thing. I have no problem with Meaford, Markdale returning to green, but why there wasn't advocacy to suggest that the Blue Mountains, and in particular the geographical boundary of that area that touches on Collingwood and Clearview Township in Grey Highlands, why that should have not been left in a red zone or something higher or somewhere in that color scheme. Because it is absolutely counterproductive to everything that we have all done through the hashtag, we're all in this together. We're no longer all in this together. These decisions are starting to pit resident against resident, neighbor against neighbor. And you can see it. You can see it in the language and the conversations online. It is getting really ugly. And to cut through and try and get to the heart of it, I think that we need to send a clear message today. One, we don't disagree. We don't agree with this decision. Two, we want to be returned to red at the very least today. Three, we want a justification as to why our neighbors immediately to the west have been put in a green zone. And four, I think personally, we should be asking the province of Ontario and the Premier of Ontario to apologize to the people who run these businesses that his policies have impacted the greatest. And before I get off my soapbox, the one last thing that I'll say, and I'm saying this right to the Premier of Ontario, he is famous for getting in front of the public. And people play a joke when he speaks, because he always starts his presentation with, my friends, my friends. And before he's done 3 sentences, it's my friends, my friends. Well, guess what, Premier Ford? Your friends are hurting. A good percentage of small businesses in this province voted you in as the Premier of Ontario. Give those people a chance. Remove us from the gray zone. So that is my rant. Premier Saunderson, I apologize, but this weekend, I don't think in the first term of council that I served, nor this, have I heard, and I'll admit it was a few, but from the few that I heard, genuine pain. Genuine pain. And that has got to be acknowledged by the people who are making these decisions. And I'll use the word blanket decisions. And I'd be happy to put something together that encapsulates those 4 points, and they could be considered at our meeting later this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You'll have that opportunity. Is there anyone else who hasn't yet spoken who would like to speak? Go ahead, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate and I understand and I'm empathetic to the passion, and I worry about pragmatism and practicality. And I have friends who work at the Ministry of Health who say that this government doesn't listen to its own workers. I don't know that they're going to listen to us, but I think we need to try. And so I would second anything that the Deputy Mayor puts forward if it contains the thoughts and sentiments that have been captured in this discussion. I would also ask our CAO if she could tell me, or anyone at the table, honestly, is there any precedent in Ontario for splitting parts of a health unit, for hiving them off to do other things? Because that is what we're asking. Can it be done?
Through the chair to Councillor McLeod, I'm not aware of a precedent for splitting parts of the health unit. I did hear out of the BIA meeting this morning that the LHINs may have had some subdivision, possibly for administrative purposes, that someone from the BIA may be able to speak to further. And I know Councillor Hamlet had just mentioned the example of York, but I'm not personally familiar with that one. I do know that Dr. Gardner has said several times in response to questions from the various CAOs, particularly Muskoka, that he had not heard that the province was, prior to now, supportive of splitting health units, mostly to decrease travel. But I think we're in a very different situation now with Grey Bruce being green and us not being. I don't think there's an argument about decreasing or increasing travel given the situation that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I think as well, some of the messaging, as to echo what Councillor Madigan had to say, is the Mercedeses that I saw all weekend are not from Collingwood. They are from a gray area that is currently under a stay-at-home order. And so clearly there is no obedience to the color zones that have been implemented anyway. And so my second question is about civil disobedience. Like, what if Collingwood were to just say, yeah, so we're not gonna enforce any of this. Have fun with that. I'm also cognizant, that seems like an impractical thing to do when I just talked about practicality, but I feel as though I don't want anybody else to get COVID in my neighborhood. But I don't want our businesses to die either, and we seem to be in an untenable situation. And so I will support any resolution that comes that would ask us to, that would find a way out of this untenable situation, with the exception, of course, of someday our vaccines will all work, won't they? And so after a rant, a ramble. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Well, I think it's the extreme unconscionability, in my opinion, of having 5 minutes to the west of us in green and we being in red down, lockdown zone, gray zone, and the mobility that we've been combating throughout this pandemic. And we've passed resolutions twice at this table asking the province to consider travel restrictions, and they've been ignored. And it's been to our detriment. And we're now seeing, even in the face of the lockdown, when our businesses are being shut down, we continue to see the travelers. So I think, we need to be advocating in the strongest possible language. We need to be working at some types of constructive resolution to this, and to be supporting businesses, giving them some support to the extent that we're able, or connecting them with supports. I think what we're going to be seeing is a multiple agenda of actions going forward. I think from the advocating, from the lobbying, and to seeing what we can do locally in terms of the challenge to support local businesses, which we have been doing throughout. And I think the crushing weight of this is that our local businesses have been working so hard throughout to comply and be compliant and protect our residents and their clients, and they have been doing a great job. And then to have this dished out as a response to all of those efforts, all of those expensive, is, I think, just beyond the pale. So with that being said, I know we've heard from the Deputy Mayor about some advocacy issues. We've heard from Councillor Jeffrey about some proactive steps and local steps to assist our local businesses. So I would open the floor to some motions to get us going. Do you want to start, Deputy Mayor? Or?
I'd be happy to. I don't know, Councillor Jeffrey, I think was, but
through you, Your Worship, it doesn't matter. The Deputy Mayor covered the motions that I had listed here.
Yeah.
And just with one note, that supporting the details of the BIA motion, but specific not to just businesses in the BIA, but business in Collingwood, because there's a lot more businesses outside of the BIA.
Yes, that's a good point. Clerk Thomas, you had your card out.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. We will be convening the special meeting of council at 6:45. And I'm wondering if that would provide time that staff work together with the Deputy Mayor to word an appropriate motion to bring forward at that time, if that would be the easiest. Regardless, the decision will have to be made at council should we wish to pursue anything formally. We would just have to do the waiving notice of motion prior to that.
All right. Is council content with that? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Well, I'm certainly content with that. If I may make a very brief comment, and that is that I hope that today we put forward a resolution that sends a message. But I do think that we need to, as a council, take step two. And step two, and Councillor Colley and I were speaking about this earlier today, and that is that, in the spring or late winter, I guess it's spring, Mayor Saunderson, you took the lead and put together a COVID task force. And perhaps I think that we went through that process and there was very good work done, and there's a lot of resources that I think that we could maybe revisit. The point being is that I think that we went through that exercise and there was almost sort of a sense of relief. Well, we didn't need to tap into it because our businesses got through the summer and we thought that there was sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. The one thing that you know, I've heard repeatedly, and I know that others have heard this, is they won't be able to survive a third shutdown. I'm not convinced that certain businesses will survive even if we were to return to red today, just given the impact. So I do believe that maybe there's a step two, and step two is that we need to, as a council, relook at some of the things that we worked upon as a result of that task force. And are there things that we can be doing from a more of a macro perspective to support the community? I'm making no false promises. Maybe there isn't, but I think it's incumbent upon us to at least review and look at those opportunities.
I think we don't know what the end is in sight in terms of this if we're unable to affect any change. And I guess one other aspect might be, would we reconvene that group to see if there's any further suggestions or any ideas from the business community? And that, I guess we can discuss that later, but immediate action is to try and get this situation changed, period, I think. Sara, if we're going to do that, because we're in SIC, I don't know if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item.
Certainly, Your Worship, it looks like we do have Matthew Priddy would like to address council.
Okay.
And we will allow him to speak.
Matthew, can you hear us?
And press *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think we're reconnected.
Yeah, we can hear you, Matthew. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to stand up for this. I was just about to turn off, but yeah, there's another good reason why Mondays is important to have these meetings linking up. So whoever organized that, great job. I understand the deputy mayor's concern, and my dad told me this, I think on Friday or Saturday, I don't remember. Yeah, with a 5-minute away playground, as Deputy Mayor was saying, it's so true. You know, with the private ski hills and with the public ski hill, yeah, we have Mercedes, SUVs, all kinds of travelers zipping through. I was speaking with the Director of Engineering today about a really important street light at Birch Street. Talked about that street light over at Bowling Alley. We need that red, yellow, green. I would say, though, I understand you're defending the businesses and the viability of them. And Councillor Madigan, well done. I totally heard you there. I would say, though, from a person, as a general public person, yes, there is fear. When I go to Sobeys and I bring groceries back here, and will I infect my parents, you know, after shopping, just from going to Sobeys? So I can understand why they put it back into a gray zone. But what I don't understand is why Blue Mountain is open. That doesn't make sense. So let's look at the bigger picture here. Blue Mountain should not be open at all. Thank you for allowing me to speak. At the same time, we should still be under a lockdown, all of the province of Ontario. If this thing is real, then opening up like this is totally not proper. So my friends, we've got a problem and a conflict of interest. So figure it out. It's either all closed or it's all open. This is a total mess. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm having trouble with my connection. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, that was a good discussion, and staff will work with Councillor Jeffrey and the Deputy Mayor, and anyone who has input can email staff, Clerk Almas, and we will reconvene then at our special meeting tonight. And Sara, just confirm what time that is again tonight.
Certainly, we will be reconvening at 6:45.
6:45, okay. All right, well, unless there's any other business, and I've lost my visual here, so Sara, if you can just let me know.
It looks like there's no further individual wishing to speak to this.
All right, and I'll look then to Councillor Jeffrey for a motion to adjourn.
She agrees.
She agrees. All right, motion to adjourn at 4:35. All in favor? I'm assuming that was carried unanimously.
Correct.
Thank you, Council, for that. And we have corporate and community services starting at 5. And